Apparently we're live, so I'm going to secretly, not so secretly, because it's definitely now on the internet. Oh, see, it said I'm live, and I got a message here that says that we're live. I'll pull it up in my email, and we can share that out.
I just want to say now that we're live and it's on the record, you're so lucky to have me because I've been featured in not one but 2 university lectures this week. So you're welcome.
Famed podcast host.
But who's counting?
Exactly, but who's counting? I one-time podcaster, amateur podcaster here, and you've got a sustained audience.
I mean, 3 episodes. Let's.
Okay, I guess they really just do go to the page, and it's right at the top of the Data Coach page, which I sent out. And now I'm streaming RSS. It's just me watching. Now I'm moving things around to get back to that page. Oh, hi, Alex. We're live streaming. Say hi to everybody.
Hey.
Just us.
You're famous now.
You're famous. You're on the internet.
You know, you could put like a sticky note on the door.
He's just grabbing his backpack. Put you up here. Okay. And I guess I could like monitor the number of users somehow, but I'm not sure how that's done. Oh, 2 people are watching now. So someone is watching us. And then I'm gonna open up the comments and we'll get going.
Now that I know what it feels like to be a floating head on a TV screen, I just want to yell about things. Like, I'll tell you that you're wrong about politics and sports. Like, that feels obligatory.
Yeah, sports, religion, anything else that we can hit on.
Yeah, like, just all the hot topics.
You name the topic and it's happening. We're going to cover all topics. Oh, well, it's the top of the hour. Should we get rolling?
With our 2 viewers?
Yeah, that's right. We've got 2 people viewing. Alex is one. Alex just chimed in, and I do get the comments straight in, so we can read them as we go. For anyone who's ever going to watch this, we get the comments coming in, and then Zach agreed / when I reached out, or I don't even know how did it even begin. Like, I think you were sharing out your viz, and I was like, this is amazing. I loved it. And you were like, it's so simple, and I don't know. I really found it super interesting. So where did it come from exactly?
I mean, I'm just trying to experiment with with more simple charts and trying to find ways to communicate stuff that looks interesting but isn't difficult to understand, because oftentimes as analysts we get bored with common charts and want to make really exotic stuff that is pleasing to our peers but difficult for everyone else. And I thought it would be fun to try to take some of the more simple charts and use them in more exotic ways. So it sort of stemmed from that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I've seen a lot of bump or step rank charts before, and whatever reason, when you showed it to me, I was like, wow, this is amazing. I guess it was just the background color, the pop of the challenge. I'm not too, like, it just really, it hit with me, and I was like, all right, like, I really wanted to do that rebuild that chart as a challenge to myself and to others so that they can get that best practice. I know that I'm just praising it a ton, but I was super impressed with how simplistic it was, but how it really hit the story.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, it sounds insane, but thank you. And I also appreciate how you took it for the exercise and twisted it and perverted it into something challenging and difficult. So that's like your superpower.
Made it into something a lot more difficult than probably what it needed to be.
Oh yeah, no, but I mean, it's like the basic premise is there. It's like the method you used to create it was more difficult, but the central gist of it is like, hey, what if we could create some sort of glowing effect to provide more visual stimuli to draw your eyes to where stuff is most significant. So it sort of came from that.
It definitely, in the business context, you think about that step rank chart, and one of the big things about it is that in real life we look at the actual value sometimes, but when we're in a rush in a business context, or when leaders are in a rush, they're just like, show me the top 5, show me the bottom 5, and show me how they rank and change over time. I don't really care so much about what the values are. I want to see how things rank over time. And I think that this kind of, even though we're looking at a very limited data set, highlights that sort of use case with this data.
Absolutely. And I mean, for me, I've been playing around with Google Trends data a lot lately, and the max number of values you can pull at a time is 5. So if you can look up 5 different things and stack them up. So in this case, I thought it'd be interesting to compare sort of superhero ideas that have been in media a lot lately and see when they're hitting the most. And it's surprising that some of them don't have some of the sticking power you might think.
Yeah, we'll find a way to like loop back in the video and pop up, because I only have the one screen that I set up for today, but I should have been smart enough to share your viz. It's really interesting. Iron Man, I didn't know. You have to tell me more about why Iron Man is considered anti-hero.
I mean, he's like an unrepentant alcoholic, but I mean, for me, it was more of comparing the idea of hero or character pairs you might think of together. So Batman and Joker's kind of obvious, and Iron Man's sort of the standout hero of the Avengers franchise, with Thanos being like the only memorable villain that's been in the entire thing. So I wanted to say, okay, here's 2 similar concepts that you would expect to track along similar trends. Let's see when one pops and one doesn't.
Now it makes sense to me.
There you go.
So maybe we should try building this thing. I've set, when I sent out a tweet and I put it on LinkedIn, I rated it as a 4 out of 10. And I said 20 minutes, and if I'm looking at the clock, we've got 25 minutes, and I figure we'll have some banter along the way. Hopefully it takes a little bit less time than that, but we're gonna make a run for it here. And I think we could just kind of walk through. Let's get some things set up in Tableau first, and then we'll start to build. In fact, just because we're working on a large screen, I'm just gonna format my workbook really quick and just change the font size to be like 15 right away, and hopefully that'll be more useful for everybody to see as they're watching later on. You looked at it over time, and I'm looking at it over time, but I did it by month, so I know that the general consensus is to sort of do this click and drag order date out. Oh, by the way, I've already connected to Superstore, but the consensus has normally been to click and drag month out onto your view or order date and then select month. I don't like to do that, so I'm gonna actually right click and go create a custom date, and I'm gonna change this from an exact date, 2 months, and then choose the date part. I know this sounds a little bit crazy, but just because I don't like the little drop-down button that comes available, so I had to do this to get rid of that drop-down button. So now if I bring this out onto columns, you'll see I don't have, I'm just going to hide this. You'll see that I don't have that available anymore, so it's gone. No longer having to deal with the fact that that drill down hierarchy and drill up hierarchy is on my view. And I use sales, so and I used region, so I'm just going to put region on color right away, and let's edit that color right away too. Again, I do things a little bit different. I'm just going to come in here and go to color on default properties on region and change the default colors here. And you may not know it, but I have a couple of Workout Wednesday color palettes already created. And I'll just hit assign palette, and I have to switch one of these colors because they're not perfect for color blindness. So we're going to start there. Zach, this is basically the same way you went about building your chart, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, obviously, I don't want to skip ahead, but I really appreciated your approach and how you decided to do months. Mine obviously was limited to years, but I'm in nonprofit fundraising, so seasonality is a big factor in a lot of our stuff, and this is a great way of sort of delineating that seasonal pop you might have. You're not going to get total volume, but you'll definitely get what stuff floats to the top and what doesn't based on time of year.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll be curious to hear what calculation you did for the bump, but for this, if we went and did it, we would just I'm just going to call this sales rank, because we're going to use sales to ultimately rank these values, and there's a lot of different ways, but I just assume that we would use something like the rank unique function.
Yep, that's what I did.
And since my base metric is sum of sales, and I'm also going to make sure that I put in DSC afterward as a second argument for descending, because I want to rank the highest values first, the lowest values last, or fourth in this case. But I think that a lot of people get caught up because there are a lot of rank options. I don't think there's going to be any ties along the way, but really it's how it deals with those ties, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, rank can be intimidating, particularly if you're not used to using it and don't necessarily know all the definitions.
Yeah, for sure. And then I'm cheating a little bit by setting my default table calculation, and I'm just going to choose region right away since it's the only dimension that I really care about in ranking upon. And I know that I could bring this rank value out, but when I just select that value from that location right away, I have my new measure and I bring it out onto rows. Tableau already does the sorting for me, so I don't have to play around with how to figure out what table calculation that I'm going to use along the way. And we're actually getting pretty close to the viz that you created, more or less the base of it. Yep. With this line chart. You'll see though, our biggest issue is we have our order kind of swapped where 1's on the bottom and 4's on the top. I could edit that R axis here and just say let's reverse it, and then I'm going to hit OK for the time being, or I don't even have to hit OK anymore. Habit of saying that. So that's the rank chart. And then the other piece was the squares, so how we're adding those squares on your chart. Spoiler, behind the line itself. Let's duplicate it, and then we'll change this to a square. And I guess from there we just dual axis this, right?
Yeah, it's just a dual axis. I mean, I was wanting to try to take simple lines and give it a little additional pop to give that sort of awareness, because otherwise sometimes you feel the temptation to trace a line all the way across the page. So I sort of wanted a glow effect, so I ultimately ended up on doing squares that created a nice little grid, and then sort of dialing the color way back on those.
Yeah, let's do that. Like probably somewhere around 50 would probably be good, I'm gonna guess. I like that. I mean, we can then just kind of, if we really wanted to, I'm gonna hide these, right? We don't need to see our headers anymore, and it's pretty much just bring this out onto sheets. And by the way, cheated a little bit, Zach. I created the dashboard size as is so that we wouldn't have to spend time formatting it.
That's evil. I like that.
But here I am still doing formatting. Let's just kind of get this spaced out a little bit. And all right. There we go. So more or less we end up with the base looking like this visualization here. And the first time I did it, we still have to get labels on. We'll get labels on in a second. But to me, then it's more or less like working with my least favorite piece, which is kind of coming back in and resizing these squares to be the right size to kind of match the viz. Did you have same, I'm going to guess, same sort of issue, not necessarily data driven?
Oh no, absolutely. That's all design. Like you throw it on your dashboard size and you determine what size page you want. And then afterwards, you're definitely going to have to do some tweaking to figure out what size fits that correctly, because there's nothing programmatic to get you there.
How much time do you spend messing with pixels and just trying to get them perfect rather than just being like, you know what, it's on the paper, it's telling the story. Do you go to 90% and you're like, you know what, the last little bit here, I could spend time on it, but no need, or are you a perfectionist all the way?
Based on the strong OCD I'm feeling from you, a lot less than you. But yeah, I mean, I a lot of it's very instinctual. I don't have a background in design. I came from an IT background, so a lot of this has been learned on the job and through public work. So really, I had a general idea of where I wanted to take it. I got it up there. And then, 10 seconds to get the squares where I want it, with a couple back and forths between the page and the dashboard view does that look right or does that look right?
Yeah, 95% of the time, I'm not getting caught up on one or two things, but then it's I don't know what it is. It'll be that one thing you just are I want to get this right, and I put in probably way too much time. For instance, if I were looking at this, I think my biggest frustration off the top here would be, why do I have these extra white spaces here? I'm sure that you must have encountered that. Let's try to fix that. So if we go to show our header, I'm going to guess that we can edit our axis. Yeah. But the issue we're going to have is that we can't put in decimals here because our rank is working with an integer. How would you work around that?
I mean, it depends how hacky you are. If you float the object on your page, you can just stretch it out. I don't actually remember what I did. I think because I was working with whole years, it was much easier to get it to exactly the dimensions I wanted. And in your case, you're working with months, and I think you've already applied your calculations. So that might be a factor. If you do it earlier in the process, it might not be as much of an obstacle. But yeah, I mean, it all depends on your approach. And I mean, if you're someone that works with a lot of white space, like Maria Brock or Kate Schaub, you're going to be golden with that white space on the end. If you're someone that wants to fill up this entire page, like probably you and me, you're going to be irked by the fact that there's this white space on the side. And I deal with that with line charts all the time.
Yeah, let's. I'm gonna just type in float, wrap the function in float here, and I think that'll fix the top portion. But then we have the axis still going to 0, and it's as simple as just unchecking x include 0. So we should more or less have the visualization for what we're looking for here. And that, I mean, this really mirrors your viz very tightly, just different data. And to me, this really does stand out. I don't even know what the values mean at this point, but I know that I can track this value and see, oh, it dipped in February, and then it's very consistent for the rest of the year. Let's just, OCD kicking in here, let's just format these values. So I'm just going to change this to abbreviation, and then I'm going to get, because of the dual access, the dividers always show up. I'm like an anti-divide user. I remove them pretty much every single time. And the same can be said for my grid lines. I detest grid lines and zero lines. The amount of time that I spend removing these line types every single time, even if I have to do it up in my workbook formatting, is way too much. But this is looking really good. Let's do one more thing before we do the really customized advanced way. Is let's add those labels in here, and I was just reading through some comments. Thanks, Alex, for the comment. Alex is a colleague of mine saying that he's watching. So one of the requirements was to put a label out on the first, basically to say it's first, second, third, fourth, and then at the end to put the region labels in there. I'm going to, and the hard part of this is I could create separate calculations and just put a label on the end here, but it's like, why make it super, super easy? And let's do it the hard way, just to like flex our thought. Particularly, the idea behind this calculation was, let's find a situation where we have an integer and we have a string and we have to combine both into a field. That's more why I wanted to do it. So I'm just going to use our order date months field. And I'm just going to say, and I'm going to do this the hard way, but it's the durable way. I'll show you why in a second. And I can just say, we're going to use window max, and then max order date of months, just because we have to put an aggregate inside of our table calculation. So what this is basically going to say, if it's the last month in my data set on my view, then let's show the region. And then else, if we do this kind of the same calculation, but I'm going to change these to min. And I think I can technically still use max here based on how it's set up, because it's that aggregation here on min or max is actually for the mark type level. And since we already have the marks at the individual months, it really wouldn't matter. And then I'll have min here, which is going to go to the last month. And then for the time being, let's attempt to put in just that rank of our sales. And you already know this is going to break. And it breaks because, well, first of all, I've got aggregates and non-aggregates in my view, so that's going to be a bit of an issue. But here's where I could just use the attribute function if I want. What do you call it, by the way? Are you an attribute, or I know that Curtis Harris kind of has like a
naming convention?
A naming convention for it. And he calls it adder. And
wow. I mean, I usually throw like cal or some other indicator on there. I've got very dated naming conventions.
Yeah, and I'm no surprise here. This is actually the expected error that I got. So I actually created an error to begin with, which is that we have an integer and a string, region and rank, but all we need to do is kind of just wrap this inside of string, and we still have an error, which is the fact that this is not neither of these are aggregates either. But again, region is on our view, so this shouldn't be too much of an issue, and I can just wrap all these. I actually did this a different way. Do I need that?
So you're doing it a third way now.
Yeah, I've done this too many different ways. Oh, our rank is already ranked, so I don't need that. And I'm just going to call this label.
We're about 20 minutes into this, and Luke has already put in about 15 minutes more work I did than originally came up with the concept. And for those of you doing this at home, I would be interested for you to comment on this YouTube video or on Twitter. I'd like to know what parts of this you found challenging. Was the dual axis a problem for anyone? Because I wonder if anyone attempting a Workout Wednesday is less familiar with dual axes, but I suspect the label part is where it gets tricky for most people. Like, most people are making it past the dual axis.
Yeah, for sure. And it looks like my rank is actually going the wrong way on my view, or my axis got swapped on accident. So let's just see what happened. Yeah, my axis, when I changed it to a float, got swapped back the other way. So I'm just going to change that. You know what? We make mistakes along the way. It's not perfect. And I think that's the whole point, is that you could see that even the creators of the challenges spend more time than they probably want to admit building this out.
Luke is a Zen master. The difference is Zen masters don't make mistakes. Zen masters know why the mistake happened quicker.
That's right. I feel like that's the best way to put it, is that I make so many mistakes. And then we had a user group in town last month when it was in Minneapolis, and someone asked for help on something, and I was like, yeah, I felt like I could confidently give an answer, and I went up there and I was like, so we're just going to play around with this for a little bit. and it'll eventually work. So while we were chatting, I just did some formatting to get the white onto our view as well. But this actually doesn't get us quite to what we're looking for. I got 1, 2, 3, 4 on there. It's looking more or less all right. But I'm going to use the case statement. I don't remember what I used. But the case statement basically says, let's just look at what values we have. And remember, we have it wrapped in a string here. And what we're going to do is say, when it's 1,
Then
then
ST.
let's give it the first.
Mm-hmm.
When it's 2, then it's second. And then all the others basically are third, fourth. Okay, so we need third too. The funny thing is that we're basically hand coding all these, but we only really need to type out these first 3, because then we can say else, which are all the other values. We could just say, give me the string of the sales rank plus th, and that would give 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. And what did I break now? I didn't. A classic mistake is when you have a case or an if statement, always make sure it has an end statement. I preach that so often, and I always forget to put it on there.
And for those of you keeping track at home, we are manually coding these rather than manually typing them. So just remember that. But mind you, this technique is valuable for all sorts of stuff. And like Luke said, it's far more durable than if you just type these in once. It'll get more bang for your buck down the road.
And that's all this, to me, why I do it the hard way is let's do it the hardest way so that, if January disappeared from our data, let's exclude it rather than hide it, then February jumps in and takes ownership and takes over the first value. Otherwise I could have said if the month is 1, then give this label. If the month is 12, give this label. So yes, going about it the hard way, but it does get us to our first solution here. I'm just going to leave the header on, but we would ultimately hide it. And our solution is right here. I just do some formatting of the size. I do want to show the other way, and the reason why we had that advanced tip in there, I know we talked about this beforehand. You're like, Luke, you've made this way too difficult, and I admitted to that, is because as we change our dashboard size, squares automatically resize, but they don't necessarily resize to the white space that I want to be using on my visualization. So what I'm going to do is go back in here and fix that white space by using a non-square mark type. And this is, I basically going to just change this to a Gantt bar, and it shows this visualization here. And I'm going to do some manual editing of these calculations. So I really think about each of these months by rank values as a 1 by 1 square. And I just want to have a little bit of space between them with this value of these rank values, basically starting at the end point, the 0, right? Even though it's 1, 2, 3, it's at the .0 level. So I'm just going to add 0.05 to each of those, and it just kind of changes it ever so slightly into, actually I changed the wrong value. I want to do it on this one. 0.05. Changes that value ever so slightly, the bump of it. And then I'm just going to go in here on the detail and just say min 0.90 and drag that on size. And I've created those squares on my visualization. Unshow that header. But then my lines are messed up. How do I fix that? Well, I can also just add 0.5 to my lines halfway to get them back located into the view, and then let's just uncheck show header, and then you'll see it more or less has that square shape. It's not perfect, but as I would change my view, it would then change the size of the squares to go with it and match in size. And that was sort of when I thought about it. I mean, I definitely, when you shared it with me, I was like, how did he do that? I want to know how to do that. It was more because when you shared it, you had done such a great job of the designing of the white space around it. I was like, how did he nail that white space so perfectly? I've seen squares and circles on them before, but you just said you put in the extra minute to resize them.
That's exaggerating. No, but I mean, I appreciate your approach, because my approach was perfect for a one-time shot, which is sizing is less important because you don't have to worry about durability. I'm not adding other years down the road, so if I get the sizing just like I want it one time, it's good forever. As soon as one more year of data rolls in, though, my design is messed up. What you're creating is much more durable, and it's embracing the same concept, but at the same time making something durable where you're going to be kind to yourself in the future and not be going back and altering the size of your squares every month or year, or however often you set your timeline to.
Yeah, I think it's easy to say that both solutions are correct. It just depends on what you're planning for. If you want to get it done, which we all do, like we don't want to. If you know it's not going to have a long lifetime, get it done, put it in, and you can be done with it with the square marks type. Otherwise, if you do want to spend a little more time thinking about how it's going to be more durable to the future, there is this solution as well.
Yeah.
So we have technically finished ahead of time. I wish I would have been smarter and asked more questions along the way, but we're learning as we go here. Zach, any final comments that you want to throw out as the guest and as the inspiration for this challenge?
Have fun, don't take yourself too seriously, and whenever possible, be kind to your future self and make durable versions of your vizzes that you won't have to constantly update. Also, if you quit your job, other people won't be cursing you down the road when they have to figure out what you did.
Awesome. I guess we're just going to wrap up at that. I want to thank anybody who's tuned in, and it looks like we have. Oh, hold on.
We have comments?
Yeah, we do.
We have people?
Yeah, we have 6 current viewers.
We're internet famous.
It looks like I must have typed out something incorrect along the way. Brian made a comment about we didn't cover all the possible case options, and Brian points out that if we had the 21st value, it would be the 20. It would have typed out as 25th. Absolutely. I would have probably written it actually a little bit differently, and maybe we've got a minute, so maybe I'll just make an edit to this calculation. Thanks, Brian, for pointing that out. Is that we're really interested in this label. Now I'm just breaking things. This value being only the rightmost value of my string.
Yep.
And the first value, so just that one value, and this should fix it. Thanks, Brian. He gave us the thumbs up on it.
And that might be something worth keeping in a file somewhere, just to cache away and throw into your vizzes whenever you need it, just switching out the values.
For sure. Do you you have the hobby of creating? I like to call myself a hobbyist, right? I create stuff and put it on Tableau Public, but as a professional, do you have a go-to repository of saved calculations?
Oh yeah, I mean, for us though, we don't have published data sources, so much of what I do is custom SQL. So it's more of SQL that I've cached away and I know is good for specific uses, and combining that. And that saves me some of the calculation work on the back end by the time stuff hits Tableau. But definitely, I mean, if there's stuff you're going to be using regularly, or even something that was super complex that you think there might be a use case for in the future, it's worth stocking that away, because next time you don't want to have to create it from scratch again.
Awesome. I want to wrap up, give everybody their 1 minute of time. It feels like we scheduled 30 minutes. We hit it almost on the tee. Thanks again, Zach, for coming along on the ride of trying to build this visualization and trying to make it a little more lighthearted, since I do make myself probably a little too seriously, or take myself a little too seriously. So thanks, and then everybody who's tuning in, thanks a lot. We'll talk to you the next Workout Wednesday Live, which will be in 4 weeks. And I have another guest planned for it. And if you're in the Tableau community, you'll know exactly who it is when I share the viz. Anyway, thanks a lot.